Hello, I'm Stephen Cole of The Listening Post. This week, Pakistan's media under pressure, reporting the siege of the Red Mosque in the shadow of government censorship. Too close for comfort? As Tony Blair's spin doctor publishes his account of 10 years at the top of British politics, we ask, just how far can you trust political memoirs? The tale of the giant killer badgers. YouTube's citizen video journalists get the picture. And I bet those smoothies at Apple never thought of testing their new iPhone like this.
I smoke. Don't breathe this.
But first, these are testing times for the media in Pakistan, with tensions running high after weeks of nationwide opposition, demonstrations, and last week's bloodshed at the Red Mosque, the latest bombing in Islamabad. Several television channels were recently taken off the air, and editors were threatened with jail sentences for covering protests sparked by the suspension of the country's top judge by the government of President Pervez Musharraf. But the media clampdown was abandoned after international criticism and the agreement of the media to stick to a new set of media guidelines, though the curbs were seen as an attempt by the Musharraf government to contain a growing political emergency. So, what now for Pakistan's media? And that's our starting point this week, the difficulties and the dangers of free speech in a cauldron of political tension and ethnic divide. The final battle for control of Pakistan's notorious Red Mosque reached its bloody climax out of sight of the television cameras. Over the past 6 months, pro-Taliban students at the madrasa have tried to impose Sharia law in Islamabad through a campaign of violence, threats and hostage-taking. Government forces raided the compound at daybreak after a week-long siege, which claimed, according to official reports, at least 100 lives.
And the aim of this operation was not to kill the people inside, but to save lives. They were told to save the lives of women and children.
On day one of the security operation, journalists flocked to the site in central Islamabad. But by day two, the media's access to the streets around the mosque was cut off.
Many people say this was because President Musharraf himself was absolutely paranoid about the sight of women and children being killed, being shot on television cameras. And the vernacular press has always seen it as its function to give images of this. And Musharraf was particularly afraid of the reaction that might take place were this to happen in the press again.
Journalists were also barred from the city's hospitals.
Yes, of course, the government was concealing things, but there were no 1,000 militants who died and the government whisked away 800 bodies. That's the kind of hysteria that the media has, I think, television media has been irresponsible about in responding to.
However, many journalists were getting unofficial reports that the death toll was much higher than government sources had claimed.
Some of them had 2 or 3 corpses, says this gravedigger, children and women buried together.
These pictures from a Pakistani network show the man being led away by security officials shortly after talking to reporters.
And this is how Pakistan's print media saw the story. The Karachi-based newspaper Dawn supported the government's crackdown on the Red Mosque extremists. The war against religious militancy and terrorism is in Pakistan's interest, and the nation expects the government to pursue the terrorists until they cease to be a force. But the conservative Islamic daily, Nawa-e-Waqt, was more critical of the raid and its timing. The government's poor strategy made us a laughingstock in front of the whole world. It is a common perception that the operation was carried out to divert attention from the government's shame over submitting abusive material to the Supreme Court. And an editorial in Awsaf claimed there was no public support for the military operation. The entire nation is grieving. Only the US wanted what happened, and proof of that is that the storming operation was celebrated at the White House and the Pentagon rather than at General Musharraf's HQ. While the government tried to keep the press at arm's length, inside the mosque and madrasa, leaders were courting media attention. Abdul Rashid Ghazi gave daily press conferences on the phone.
The 2 Ghazi brothers were experts at putting information in pillboxes for media for quick consumption so that they would look not only brave, not only kind of declaratory, but not so inflammatory, merely kind of honest crusaders.
By the time Ghazi was shot dead in the raid, he'd had already secured his position as a television martyr. When the mosque fell into the hands of the army, the backlash began. Suicide bombers struck in Islamabad, killing at least 12 people at a lawyers' rally. Ironically, some sections of the press were claiming that government intervention at the Red Mosque was timed to draw media attention away from the continuing crisis of the Chief Justice being sacked.
People were going to start a debate on this. So he started this military operation on the Red Mosque. And the whole international and national media was focused on that. And that also diverted attention of the people from what was happening in London when most of the opposition party leaders met here. So that it was a multi-purpose thing for Mr. Musharraf, and he succeeded.
Coverage of the protesting lawyers has been a thorn in Musharraf's side.
All of a sudden you saw the electronic media going absolutely wild. Vicious anti-establishment remarks, live coverage of literally every single protest rally all over the country, minute-by-minute coverage, people literally lambasting the state, the legal profession, and everything else that came in the way. In my opinion, that's not really what the media's responsibility should be towards an issue that is as important.
The government agreed and shut down television channels broadcasting the anti-Musharraf demonstrations.
The police entered a television channel's office and broke up the panels, beat up the journalists, and they created a kind of a terror. And that was also shown all live. So, but Musharraf thought that it is the press which is actually creating this trouble. I mean, he ignored the fact that it is he who was creating this trouble.
Musharraf also tried to rush through a new law curbing media freedoms, but was forced to relent after an international outcry.
There was also very quick criticism, not only from the international press rights organizations like Human Rights Watch, like Amnesty, like Reporters Sans Frontières, etc., but also there was very strong criticism from Western governments.
With an election on the horizon, the international media spotlight will be trained on Pakistan again, and it remains to be seen whether or not Musharraf will have learned any lessons from the Red Mosque. Our Global Village Voices now, and their views on that story.
The government of Pakistan and the media have reached a point where Islamabad has started feeling that electronic media can be anarchist, can actually destroy the establishment, can actually be a serious problem for the Pakistani authority. And they now are seriously thinking how to tame the media, how to control the media. The events of Karachi and the live coverage have brought the Pakistani establishment head on with the electronic media. And since then, they're trying to tighten the screw through the new regulations, but those new regulations, except for stopping of the live coverage, have not really been agreed upon.
Well, President Musharraf has made a huge effort with the international media in the past few years, especially since 9/11. He's gone out and given interviews to the Washington Post, to the Guardian in London, to the Times. You know, he's tried to go there and played the media game because he knows that he needs their support. So he's gone to them and said, well, look, I'm not a hardcore fundamentalist. I'm here to try and stabilize the country. I'm here to try and keep the radicals at bay, and I'm here to try and deal with the problem with terrorism that we have.
If you've got an opinion on the media and want to be one of our Global Village Voices, it's straightforward. Just email us at listeningpost@aljazeera.net. If you've got a smart take on a global story and how it's being covered, tell us. Let's catch up with the media news now. Listening Post News Bites, and people have been locked up in the Tower of London for less, so not surprising that the BBC has apologised to the United Kingdom's Queen Elizabeth for wrongly implying she'd stormed out of a sitting with the American celebrity photographer Annie Leibovitz. A promotional trailer shown to journalists for a forthcoming documentary series gave the impression the monarch had abruptly halted the photo shoot when Leibovitz asked her to remove her crown. Leibovitz is one of the world's most famous photographers and is renowned for making unusual requests of her subjects. But the footage was actually filmed as the Queen made her way into the sitting, not out of it. The BBC said the trailer had been edited incorrectly, and the independent production company RDF, which made the film, took responsibility for the mistake. But the BBC's problems didn't end there. An investigation into their handling of television phone-ins found the corporation had faked competition winners on a number of high-profile shows. The BBC has cancelled all phone-ins now, and Director General Mark Thompson made a public statement announcing the biggest staff retraining in the history of the BBC.
Deceiving the public is totally unacceptable. It is a gross breach of discipline and will lead, in most cases, to immediate dismissal.
Ecuador's president, Rafael Correa, has never had the most cordial of relationships with his nation's media, often characterized by them as a communist, an instrument of Hugo Chavez, and even the devil. He's now taken the bold decision to no longer give any news conferences. Well, seen here espousing his commitment to revolutionary principles on CNN Español, Correa's political and constitutional reform program has elicited scathing reactions from the media. He follows the lead of Néstor Kirchner of Argentina, who has not given a news conference since becoming president in 2003. How we've missed him. US documentary maker Michael Moore has called a truce in his week-long fight with CNN. He went off the deep end on live television when interviewed about his new film, Sicko, which looks at the American healthcare system. CNN aired a segment entitled Sicko Reality Check, in which Dr. Sanjay Gupta, the network's chief medical correspondent, did his own fact check and concluded that Moore did fudge the facts. When given a chance to speak, Moore immediately put host Wolf Blitzer on the defensive.
And you're the ones who are fudging the facts. You fudged the facts to the American people now for I don't know how long about this issue, about the war. And I'm just curious, when are you going to just stand there and apologize to the American people for not bringing the truth to them that isn't sponsored by some major corporation?
Moore has since said that as CNN has now admitted to 2 mistakes in its reporting of Sicko, he's now willing to move on. And finally, and not for the first time, rumours turned into newspaper stories this week with the tale of the mystery killer badgers of Basra. That's right, the mystery of the killer badgers of Basra. Now the question was, did they or didn't they exist? Well, the puzzle may have been cleared up thanks to a citizen journalist. Ever since Iraqi newspaper Al-Mashriq ran the story, word has spread that United Kingdom troops had introduced strange man-eating badgers into the city. This footage, released on YouTube, may prove the badgers exist, but whether it was filmed storming out or walking into the photo shoot is probably one for the BBC to rule on. Off with the badgers. Coming up after the break, political biographers. What happens when they get too close to their subjects?